There we go.
Okay.
We are
Thank
live
you.
and running.
Well, hey, Charlie.
Hello.
It's absolutely lovely to have you with us. Can you, just for the purpose of the video, can you introduce yourself and your age, and maybe tell us a little bit about your lifestyle in Sydney and how long you've been here and
Sure.
yeah, that kind of thing.
So my name's Charlie Nightingale. I'm age 66. I retired almost 4 years ago. I live over in Vaucluse in the eastern suburbs, and we moved over here as a family 28 years ago for a better lifestyle for our kids, and we couldn't have had a better one, especially on a day like today.
Yeah, it's showing off today.
Absolutely.
And whereabouts are you from? When
Birmingham,
you say you
England.
Birmingham.
Yeah,
Oh,
so-
you don't have a very strong Birmingham accent.
No, that's right. That if you know Peaky Blinders, that's how I would have spoken some years ago.
Fantastic. I kind of regret that you don't. And you
I can put it on if you like.
Oh, excellent. Let's do that the whole time. And you mentioned that you have kids. Do you have grandkids yet?
One day, hopefully.
One day, hopefully.
But not at this point. I've got a 28-year-old, a 30-year-old, and a 32-year-old.
So one day, hopefully, soon, right?
Very, very soon. Exactly that. Keep on telling them biological clock is ticking.
Yeah, and all boys, girls?
2 boys and a girl. The 32-year-old is in Melbourne. She's the oldest, and she's moving off to New York in May.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, for
Is that
her.
a big dream for her? She's going with work?
She's going with her partner, who she's about to marry next week. So
Oh, next week.
yeah.
Is that the first one married?
first one married, yeah, and hopefully the 2 will follow suit not long afterwards, but we'll see.
Excellent. So
yeah.
they're all partnered up and very settled, and
They are, I'm very pleased to
so
say.
you're off the hook.
Yes.
So in that case, have you substituted children with pets?
No.
No pets?
I'm very clear on that. We, growing up back in the UK, we had a dog, and that dog was allowed to go wherever he wanted and do whatever he wanted. And I didn't have to clear it up. I didn't have to take it for a walk or any of those things.
Yep.
You can't do that in Australia. So
Nope.
in this day and age, and I'm talking obviously many years ago, because you can't do that in England now either. But the point is, a pet is a full-time requirement and not for me.
Yeah, no, understood.
And also
yeah.
restricts our ability to travel now that we're in retiring.
Yeah, that's very much a consideration, isn't it, in the later years?
Absolutely.
And so no pet, but so what would you do in your free time in terms of, you know?
Yeah, so I volunteer once every couple of weeks at the Sydney Jewish Museum as a guide for the 40,000 kids a year go through from the New South Wales education system, go through the Holocaust, the Jewish Museum as part of their history teachings. So I guide once every couple of weeks there. I manage our family's investments, and up until a few weeks ago I was seeing my dad on a daily basis, but unfortunately he passed away a few months shy of his 94th birthday.
Oh, well, I guess you were lucky to have him for so long.
And we
but
were
still,
indeed.
that really hits home. And I take it you're Jewish.
I am.
If you're guiding at the Sydney, although I think that
You
you
don't have
can
to
be a
be.
guide. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've got a Jewish friend
absolutely.
who does the same, and she's like, Brian, you can come and be a guide.
Absolutely.
So yeah, good to know. So I'm gonna circle back to your day here today at Citro, and I'm gonna jump more into retirement and you know, how you're feeling about retirement and things like that. Can I just say that I was going to be all flash and not use a mouse, but see, I'm known to be like Gen X, right? Like we're mouse people,
And
I
I'm
thought,
a baby
no,
boomer, so I'm the last of the baby
I thought I'll
boomers.
just, you know, I'll be all, but I can't. So first of all, I just want to ask you a little bit more about working life.
Yeah.
And something that really grabbed me about your the little clip you did to become a CCO for the day was you were very distinctive about the fact that you were Charles at work,
Yes.
and now you're very much Charlie.
Correct.
And so I wanted to talk to you a bit about that identity at work versus retired. So
Very important. Yeah.
Can you talk to me about why you're distinctly those two? You know,
Well, coming
why
from
you think-
England, and being called Charles by my parents, but being called Charlie by my friends was always something that I had growing up. And I did work with my father for quite a few years, and he always referred to me as Charles. So I was Charles at work.
Yep.
And then gradually, once I became more familiar with the Australian way of life over here, and the more casual attitude towards names, I wanted to change back to the Charlie in the workforce, it just didn't work.
Yeah.
For some reason, it didn't translate very well. So up until the point at which I retired, I was Charles.
And do you think that there was like a formality in
Yes.
like a professional Charles versus
Correct.
kick around Charlie?
Correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. I presented in my business suit, for example, as if I was a lawyer or an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
So the Charles, nomenclature suited for the environment I was working in. I was managing, putting on large corporate events and taking trade delegations over to Israel in my last job. And then prior to that, I was with Specsavers heading up their corporate division. So I was dealing with a large number of corporates. It was more appropriate to be called Charles in both of those instances. But the minute that the switch turned, I was into Charlie mode, and from that point onwards, I felt far more comfortable and authentic.
Yeah, and that was actually the thing that I took from that is, do you think there's a difference between our work persona and the real us that gets to come out to play a little bit more when you retire?
100%. So one of the things that I'd gone through in my corporate work experience was that a lot of people of similar age to me or younger were totally encapsulated by their identity at work. And if there were, there's quite a few redundancies that went on a few years ago, and especially at top ends of some of the banks, for example, and people fell apart because their identity was totally tied up as a man with being in that position. So when I made the conscious decision to move to retirement over a period of about 5 months, I stepped back from my identity at work and started to be more relaxed about then transitioning from being an employee to be a retiree. And for me, it was a really easy transfer. And for a lot of my contemporaries, not so much, but I'd had a really very helpful mentor in which my dad, who'd retired at 60, because he had his own business, and at 57 he went to a wealth creation seminar. The guy came on stage, looked around the audience, everybody looked like my dad at that point, and he said to them, so guys, it looks like you're around similar kind of ages, you've had this much of your life and you've known more or less what it is you're going to do. You've got this much of your life left, what are you going to do with that? And the average life expectancy of a man living past retirement in those days, in the late mid-80s in England, was 5 years. My dad lived 33 years past his retirement. So that was a model for me to focus on. Well, retirement doesn't mean I stop as an individual learning, for example. So I started to explore a whole host of other activities. So I signed up for a financial management course, something called Masterclass, which is a great opportunity to learn whole new skill sets and understanding how people from different industries are motivated and work, and then to explore the interest I have for history, and travel. Now, obviously, with my dad no longer being here, the opportunity to travel is greatly enhanced as well.
Yeah.
So I'm more motivated now and more energized than I have been for many years, when going to work was not a bind because I really enjoyed it, but it was doing more or less the same thing with different people, doing different experiences. But now, knowing I've got this much of my life left to go, I want to enjoy it as long as I can and hopefully live for as long as my dad did.
Yeah. And did you kind of have a plan before retirement as to what that might look like? And how did you go about that process?
Well, it completely changed, unfortunately, because what I'd done was got in contact with a couple of the businesses that I'd invested in, because I look after the family's investments, and was offering them the opportunity to do some consulting work, primarily in the customer, the investor manager space, because I was an investor. I knew what, as an investor, people were looking for, and to help manage that process. All three of them that I approached said, yep, we'd love to have you on board in some format. And just as I retired, which was right in the middle of COVID, I got COVID Delta, and was wiped out for three weeks. And then once I started to go through the recovery process, my wife's sister back in the UK got diagnosed with breast cancer. And so we applied to have leave so we could help her. She was a single mom with 4 kids. So we went over to the UK, and I had to get in touch with the businesses I said I was going to do consulting for. I said, look, I'm going to be out for 3 months. It's not going to happen, unfortunately. And whilst I was over there and found that I was doing all these things that I'd started to want to explore, I thought, I actually don't want the consultancy role.
You don't want part-time work at all.
No, exactly.
I want to be fully retired.
Yeah. So
that's so reliable.
So then when I came back in December of 21, the beginning of 2022 is when I started to look at these other opportunities. And again, you know, my dad said to me, he was living in the Gold Coast, and I'd been saying to him for some time, my mum died 9 years ago now, but at the time, six years previously, I said, when are you going to come to move to Sydney? He was living up there for 20 years. He said, when you retire. And I said, deal.
And so you had time together.
So basically, my wife's lost both her parents during COVID back in England. We couldn't get out to see for the funeral. So my dad and her dad were around the same age, and he kind of figured out, oh well, I should be with my family. So when he made that decision, it was an easy decision for me. And then the mental decision took a little bit longer, because I had to go talk to the chair, the CEO of the company, and say to them, look, this is what I want to do. And they also wanted me to do something for them as well, but all of that.
But again, you'd already had that epiphany, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was like, right, that's it now. And a lot of people who I'd spoken to, my contemporaries who'd retired, they'd said the same thing. Make sure in the process you go through before you leave that you've left the identity. And you've stayed with the person that you are. And
so would you say you brought your retirement forward a little bit in order to spend more time with your dad in that way? Or
100%.
It was, yeah. So you kind of hadn't planned to retire, because you're quite young.
Yeah, absolutely.
You hadn't planned to necessarily retire at that point.
Not at that point.
But COVID, the health scares, your wife losing her family, like a lot of things came
all
together.
All of those things came together.
And you were like, right, I'm done.
And
see you, Charles.
Exactly the point. And so once my dad moved, it just made more sense that we didn't know how long he was going to be here for, and we had a fantastic time. And our kids as well were able to spend a lot of time with him that they wouldn't have ordinarily had to spend as well. So going up to visit him in the Gold Coast. So it's been great for our family. The whole thing has been a great experience.
That really is, that's terrific. I just want to ask you one more question about the Charlie thing, because as I said, I'm fascinated by it. In the sense of, I kind of, as soon as you sort of said that, I thought, of course. And yet it's not something that we ever really talk about much. And I think that for our audience, it's a really unique little hook. Do you know what I mean? As in, you kind of get to shuck off a certain persona that you've had for a long time that may or may not be you. I mean, it's you.
There's certain aspects,
it's you.
Obviously.
Yeah, but it's not you.
No.
So in that frame, like, what do you think was different about Charles and Charlie? Do you know what I mean? What did Charlie not be able,
Yeah, I suppose to be much more mindful of my behaviour, for want of a better expression.
Careful,
and
that's that professional.
That's right.
That glaze,
it was important that I was Chief Customer Officer for the business, so I was kind of the face of the company. So it was right to be professional at all times. And where it was appropriate, I could have a laugh, etc. But it wasn't the main point of my meeting with the people was to identify what they wanted to do with the organisation and help provide the opportunity for them to do that. When I was back at the office, I was able to be a bit more relaxed, working with the team back at the office. But because also I was doing presentations to 400 or 500 people on stage, you had to have a certain level of
sheen.
Exactly. And to carry yourself appropriately, which is difficult to do when you come home. You just want to relax.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the Charlie would then come into play. So if I took my wife Helen to one of our corporate functions, and someone would come up to us and say, "Oh, where's Charles?" And she'd go, "Who?"
Because she's forgotten about that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a relaxed thing, isn't it? That's what I'm getting coming out. that
Absolutely.
Retirement just allows you just to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you
so,
don't
for
need
example,
to-
coming in today,
Yeah.
this is the first time I've come in today to the city as a business opportunity, purely from a customer-facing type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a bit nervous, I have to say, because I don't know what expectations you guys had of who it is that you're talking to when I'm coming in.
Yeah.
Because you haven't put a criteria. You've got to do this. You've got to tick these boxes, etc. Did you satisfy your requirements when you did the video and give your background about what you've done before?
Yeah.
So, I'm on test to a certain extent, but you're also on test to a certain extent. So
It's a whole new thing every time.
yeah, and I love the concept, because what terrific idea to actually approach your customers to find out what it is that they want to do, what they like, what they don't like, and the things that you can maybe have some added value from our experience.
Absolutely, and it's like a amazing opportunity for us as writers to actually hear the voice of our customers who we're writing for.
Yeah.
Like it really is very special. Just to wrap up the work thing, like what do you miss about work life now that you're
that's a
retired?
good question. The team. I used to really enjoy the team.
Yeah.
That was always fun, but also the engagement at customer level. I built up some, I wouldn't call them necessarily friendships per se, but strong acquaintanceships. So after I left work, I still kept in contact with quite a few people, and it was lovely to do so, because when you're spending a lot of time with people and you're building a relationship together, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Yeah. And it's a unique one too, isn't it?
Yeah.
In the sense of you spend more time with your work colleagues than you do your
100%.
spouse.
Yeah, 100%.
And so even though it's not a friendship, it's a stronger relationship in many ways. You know a lot about people.
Absolutely, and especially under pressure. So
yeah.
Once people are under pressure, their true personality usually comes out, and sometimes you can see things you don't particularly like about them and also about yourself.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing I kind of miss, that ability. Also, what I used to love was, when I was in the customer-facing role, was identifying what our customer wanted us to provide for them, and hearing the opportunity flick a switch in my head that would say, I need to have this person come and have a chat to you, or if we're going to do a corporate event, we need these speakers, because they're going to be perfect for what you want to do with your target audience. And to be able to put those threads together was a mental agility exercise that I really enjoyed. So
that true networking thing,
absolutely,
isn't it? That goes with this. And
because networking I found I was quite good at, but I didn't have any formal training in that. And a lot of people think networking is just exchanging business cards. But in terms of building relationships, and especially in Australia, the concept of building relationships, I found different to building relationships in the UK.
Okay.
There was very much a hierarchical structure in the UK that was based on class.
Still.
That I'm talking 20, almost 30 years ago now.
Yeah.
But over here, I didn't find that, and I found that a real pleasure to be part of. That you could form a relationship with people because you liked them.
Yeah.
And I tended to work with people that I liked and obviously liked me.
Yeah, that's so true. You obviously never encountered the boys' club from the old schools.
I did.
Because there's a little bit of that still.
Definitely that exists, but I also found ways to circumnavigate that on occasion.
And it's not solid. It's not like in England, I'm sure.
Oh, in England it was very solid.
I'd never thought of that still being a thing. So
it might not be.
Insight.
I've not worked over in England for many years.
I was thinking 100 years ago. So.
No, it was very much a thing in my. I worked for 20 years in the UK, so in that time, I definitely saw that.
And so, okay, the flip side of that question, of course, is what don't you miss about working?
The constant pressure to perform, because you're only as good as your last job, and it doesn't matter what fantastic event I put on last week, for example. It's like, what am I got What have I got lined up for the next few months, etc.
Yeah,
So you
true.
can't rest on your laurels. You always have to be innovating. You always have to come up with new ways to satisfy a customer. And that comes from obviously the engagement at customer level, but at the same time, understanding what their strategic needs are and trying to align them with your own. So that was difficult, because you couldn't always do that. And we'd had sometimes we couldn't, because somebody was looking for something that just wasn't achievable. So we had to find a different way of working with them. And that constant pressure to perform, to always deliver first class experience so that you get repeat customer engagement. If that situation didn't go as well as I would have liked, it really used to knock my confidence. And then to come back from that and to keep going, that was the thing that I really didn't enjoy.
Yeah. So satisfying, but certainly that kind of that special, unique pressure.
Yes.
That really is unique to work, isn't it? It kind of goes, does it, with retirement? You don't have anything
Definitely.
in the same way pressuring you like that?
Oh, that's sure. There are certain pressures, but you manage those pressures differently, because when you're working with a team, it's not you. There are certain aspects that only you can do, and there are certain aspects the team can do to pull together, and that could be frustrating. Yeah. Because depending on how well or poorly I articulated what I was requiring from the team, would transfer into either a positive or a negative experience. So having the constant pressure on me meant that I was putting pressure on other people, and that sometimes could cause challenges as well.
Yeah, hard to contain that kind of pressure, isn't it? Even though you don't want to pass it on, but
it is. And worrying about the next few months planning. I'd wake up on a Sunday, in the middle of the night, Sunday, think, oh Christ, what have I got to do tomorrow? So in terms of what I don't miss, there's that. But what I do miss is the excitement of being able to create and having a conversation, say, for example, today, and then going back to the office and then coming back in a couple of days' time with a plan, and then seeing that plan come to fruition where you got bums on seats, or we're taking a delegation over to Israel, for example. That was a big commitment for people to spend a week in another country and make sure that I managed the engagement that they had with each other, and made sure that people weren't just forming little cliques over on this side, that they all participated and got some great value from the experience. Yeah,
it's interesting because I'm taking that sort of networking, teamwork, working together was probably the most enjoyable part potentially of your work life, but the interests that you now have seem quite solitary.
It's very true.
So is there potentially, like are you looking for a more social kind of way of doing the things you like in retirement, or is that?
I think that probably I found that the most time I was spending was always doing other things for other people, and especially when my dad became ill, it was taking up a lot of my time. So I think now that I've got older and wiser, so to speak, I've got more time to spend on my own personal development, which I enjoy. But it doesn't mean that I'm going off into a cave, for example. But I also co-invest alongside some other retirees that I'm friendly with, and so we socialise as well. And I enjoy socialising because I want to socialise, not because I have to.
Yeah, that's
And so that's much more an enjoyable experience because of it. Because I was having to, especially if I was away for a week in Israel, for example, to be performing, so to speak, for a week from morning till night was difficult.
It's exhausting. Exhausting.
Yeah.
You mentioned just then want to, not have to. Do you think that kind of sums up retirement in a nutshell? You get
I think it does.
There's a lot more wants than haves, right?
Absolutely. And what the beauty of retirement for me is that it gives you that space to start thinking of what's really important in your life, and what is it that I've always wanted to do but never really had the opportunity to explore, and all of a sudden new open pathways appear. And the one aspect I used to really enjoy from a customer perspective was meeting lots of people. So obviously that's diminished now. So I am looking for ways to expand.
Yeah, there are
that
plenty of pathways towards that.
Yeah.
And it's really like, people often think of retirement and the word itself, of course, about this winding down and a stopping of some. But it's talking to people like yourself, you realise it's actually just the beginning of a whole new thing.
100%.
If anything, you're winding up.
Yeah. Well, I think
Yeah.
a friend of mine, Nigel Marsh, wrote a book, Fat, 40 and Fired.
I know
And,
that.
yeah.
I know. He's got 3, has he
He's
now?
got
He's
3.
up to 60?
He's up
Yeah,
to 60.
I think I'm up to
so
50,
He's
but
a
I haven't
couple of
read
years
60.
younger than me, but he calls going into your third trimester.
Ah, yeah, okay.
And that's, I think, sums it up perfectly. That the first 30 years you're going through learning about who you are, and hopefully marrying, having a family, etc. Then the next 30 years you're growing that side of your personality, your business, your family.
And you're too busy to actually have time to reflect on
Absolutely.
anything.
And now, we don't know how long we've got, but we've got time to now just do the things that we really want to do.
Yeah.
Than rather have to.
So he's a mate of yours, is he?
Yeah.
Because I love his podcast.
His podcast, Five My Life, is phenomenal.
Just the best. Yeah. So we might give him a little plug there.
Oh,
'cause
absolutely.
the more people that listen to that, the better, I think.
I could not agree more.
And so tell me, so reflecting on all of this and the fact that you're not too far into your retirement.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you give people who are sort of in that kind of planning stage? So you're like your 50 to 60s, really trying to figure out how am I going to make this work and everything. Have you got some?
The most important thing is to work out whether you're financially able to do the things that you want to do. And if you haven't got that planned, you're going to be in for a tough time. So you have to make sure that whatever the financial objectives you want to have to be able to live a retirement that you're comfortable with, you really need to put the financial planning in, because if you don't do that, you can come unstuck. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, having made those decisions and put those things into practice, stick with it consistently, is to then determine what is it that you want to do once you're in retirement. Because, as I say, you got that last third, or hopefully, that you've got to live your life. You want to be able to do the things that you want to do, and can afford to do, more importantly, because there are plenty of things I'd love to do, but I can't afford to do. And then the third thing is, make sure you talk those plans through with your partner and your family. Yeah. Because the partner, if they are not used to having you around the house, it can be a really difficult time. So quite a few of my friends, for example, their wives couldn't stand to have them in the house the whole time.
Yeah, I've got a few of those already. So what's your wife's name?
Helen.
Helen.
Yeah. So it's really important that she is on side to make sure that you can work together to do the things you want to do together, and to do your own things independently, and not have difficulties exploring those things.
And do you and Helen spend a lot of time together, or are you one of those couples that sort of...
No, we do spend a lot of time together.
So what would like a typical day be like for...
Well, we both
Charlie
work
and
at we both guide at the museum. Sorry, we both volunteer at the museum. I'm a guide. Helen works with the survivors to do their talks. So that's been a really rewarding experience for both of us.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Helen,
have you done that for a long time?
3 years now.
Yeah. So that was something that you could pick up in retirement because you had more time.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's because I wanted to give back. I wanted to find a way to give back to the community. We already do Meals on Wheels together. And then,
okay, you do that as well.
Yeah, and then Helen, she used to work with special needs children, both in preschool and high school. And then she got approached to join an organisation called Mom to Mom.
Oh, I know it.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, and she absolutely loves that. So it's a fabulous organisation.
Does she do the going in
She's
with
only
the
just
newborn?
starting.
No, I've actually volunteered with them myself.
Okay.
I'm not at the moment, but it's wonderful. It's exactly the kind of thing, and I'm sure Helen said the same, that I would have loved to have had when I had my first baby.
Yeah.
Like just a mum coming in, to sort it out, because we're not all lucky enough to have parents that are around. Okay, so I'm going to give you we're going to do fast favourites.
Okay.
Okay, and then we're going to swing back to talking about your day today, if that's
Right.
okay. So our fast favourites are like essentially just I'll give you a word and you give me a response, and we basically use it in our newsletter Spotlight on You. So let's just say that they're probably the most read part of the article. So if I said your fast favourite person.
Oh, blimey, David Bowie.
Oh, nice. Destination?
Favourite place to want to go and visit is Egypt.
Good. Again, like your choices here. Hobby?
Hobby, playing guitar.
Food?
Food, oh, that's a good one. Italian, probably.
Popular choice. Movie?
Movie, that's very straightforward. Blade Runner.
Okay, this is a good guy. Book?
No, that's a really interesting one. So I think probably How to Win Friends, Influence People.
Charles, yeah. I thought you might say Nigel Martin.
Nigel's is great, but if there was one pivot moment in my business life that helped me in terms of business relationships, that was it.
That was the book. Yeah, no, it's a good one, hey? Life advice.
Life advice. Wow. Explore your passions, but make sure you can do it within the environment that allows you to do that. And then if you can't find a way to do that, exist within the environment that you are until you can find it, but don't stop looking for it.
That is very good advice. And last one, money tip.
Money tip, save. You need to save very early on, and I think one of the challenges that we have in this day and age, and is certainly something that was missing in my education, we're not taught the value of money until we're in the workforce.
We're not taught the value of compound interest
Oh,
enough.
100%.
It's glazed over in maths.
Absolutely.
We all just, but if we knew.
Doesn't Einstein say that's the biggest secret in the world? Compound interest, absolutely.
Allegedly, yeah.
Allegedly. So the point is that, start saving early and start understanding the ability of delayed gratification.
Absolutely. Delayed gratification. Yeah, that's very wise advice. I'm going to go home and remind my children of that one. Okay, so I'm just going to circle back to being a Citro member.
Yep.
So how long have you been a Citro member for?
Not long, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
I've been a newsletter subscriber much longer than I've been a Citro member.
So how long have you been a newsletter subscriber? Because they're the people we're completely interested in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you been getting our newsletter for long?
Probably well over a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, you are an early adopter there. And I understand recently you've signed up for the card so you can experience the process and stuff. And I'm sure you had a lot of advice on that for others. From our perspective in content, we'd like to get your feel for what you think of the newsletter that we put out and what you feel we could do better, or what you feel we do well, or all that kind of thing. So
I think the thing that I like about the newsletter when I first signed up for it was that it was focused on retirees and things that were important to retirees. However, having become a retiree and explored the things that I wanted to explore, I feel that there's two distinct demographics. You've got one is your pre-retirees and one is your retirees. So I think the content needs to be focused differently and segmented according to that. So for me, for example, if I was looking at financial services piece in a newsletter, it would be around investing. Whereas if it was somebody in their 50s, for example, it would be about salary sacrificing, for argument's sake.
Absolutely.
And things that health tips, etc. Because once you get above a certain age, obviously the health starts to deteriorate. And now most of my contemporaries, all we ever do is talk about our health issues.
That's right. Your social life's at the doctor's, isn't it?
Absolutely. So when you're in your 20s and 30s, you think you're invincible. So you don't look after yourself the way you should. And it's only once you get to a retirement point in your life, you go, hang on a second, that body you're carrying is not going to survive for the next 30 years that you've got, unless you do some certain activities. So
Yeah.
I've had to actively lose weight, go to gym, which I hate, and try and build some muscle.
Yeah. Yeah.
So because these are the things that you find that diminish over time. My dad swam every day in a public swimming baths when he was working for 20 years. And he stayed strong because of that. Whereas a lot of people, especially as they age, osteoporosis sets in.
Yep.
And if they have a
Sarcopenia.
fall, all of a sudden that's a slow descent. So I think the focus on health at different points in your life would be an important aspect. And then content that's aimed at entertainment, I think, because entertainment is a big part of the consumer culture, but obviously there's a large focus on the Gen Zs, etc.
Exactly, yeah.
But not so much for our people of our age. And so, you know, unless we were a subscriber to the ACO or whatever it might be, it would be nice to see content around that. And then travel. You know, travel. I think is really important.
Yeah, travel's definitely our heartland in that sense. And I don't know if you would have seen, we literally last week newly introduced what we're calling Noteworthy, which is recommendations for things to do, things to see, things to, So we're hoping that will get some traction, and people were definitely clicking on it. So I think they are looking for just some guide to what they might like to see on TV or read a book or whatever it happens to be. So that's very good feedback. Thank you. So do you play any of the crosswords and games and things that we have? That's not your thing at all? No. And can I ask you, like, if you've been a subscriber to the newsletter for a year, I don't know if you've been asked this question already, but were there barriers to becoming an actual cardholder member? Was it just not something that you're particularly interested in, or?
It was the value proposition I didn't see fully defined to want to take on another debit card.
Yeah.
I had to see, and I've explained this to the people I met with today,
Yeah.
that there's got to be a really compulsive reason to want to take to go through the onboarding process, because to get a card is straightforward enough in, you know, if you're talking about getting a new CBA card or whatever, but with this it's quite specific, and then you've got to link it to your bank account, which can feel very invasive to somebody who's not really fully on board with the concept of what you're trying to promote.
Yeah.
And therefore the incentive has to be there for somebody to A, want to come on board, and then B, to want to use it on a regular basis. So for me, what I've been feeding back today is give me an incentive to come on board, and then give me an incentive to keep on board.
Yeah.
And make it simple for me, because at the moment
It does feel complex, yeah?
It's too complex, and because I'm not a great mobile user, I am a very big desktop user.
Yep.
And I understand that the product's going to go on the desktop. It's just going to make everybody's life that much easier, I believe.
Absolutely,
for someone of my age, that's for sure.
Oh, look, you know, I mean, as I said, the representative at Citro, who's in the Citro age group, that was the first thing I said when I started working here. I don't want to download your app.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be on my phone. We don't, like, you know, I'm sure your generation's even less likely than but Gen X is the same. We're like, a little, it's small, I'm not, you know. We're PC users. We're on.
Absolutely.
So that's really good feedback. Let me just ask you a couple more questions about your day with us, and then we'll wrap it up. Because what I'm curious, what made you? I think I know the answer to this, having talked to you. But what made you decide to become a chief customer officer for Citro?
I loved the idea. When I first came across the news, I thought, what a simple idea. Why has nobody else thought of this before? Because this is asking the customer exactly what it is they want, and you're qualifying who that person should be by saying it's a chief customer officer role. Therefore, you need to have some of the experience of being in that role or similar beforehand. So you're getting some real value from someone who's got experience to offer a different set of eyes and a life experience that can bring some added value that you may not be aware of. And at the same time, for me as a retiree, it's got me back into the workforce for a day to see the life that I used to be part of.
Yeah.
So it was a win-win across the board.
Agreed. No, yeah, yeah. It's very. It's really, as I said earlier, it's exciting for us to be able to meet the people that we're writing for, and get their perspective, and always something new that just goes, one of those little moments. What surprised you the most about being here today and meeting the team?
How small it is. I have been involved in a startup before, and I know that everybody has to be chief cook and bottle washer and doing the different things that they're doing.
Yeah.
But it was, it was a surprise to see how small the team was. But knowing that you do have the backing of a large organisation that funded the startup concept, but also seeing different people's backgrounds and how they've come together and put together what they think was the right thing for the target audience.
Yep.
And now getting more insight from that target audience, and being so willing to listen to, you know, what I'm thinking or what other people are thinking about the area that we operate in for our own personal enjoyment, and B, to understand what it is that your product can offer to people like me. I think this has been a tremendous initiative.
That's really great to hear. Is there anything in particular that you think either we do well or that we could do better, like that really grabbed you today across the board?
A willingness to hear insight, and to challenge, and not just to take on board what I'm saying as being gospel, and to explore the things that I thought were useful to add to the conversation.
Yeah, like I like that about working here, to be honest. It was very much an open thing, and there's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
Frequently there's lots of right answers. We can only do one right answer, so
Sure.
that right answer. But yeah, it's a really open environment.
Yeah, and I think that you'll have tremendous opportunity following the input that you're going to get from various people like me, that you'll have too many ideas, and you'll need to triage them very, very firmly to make sure that they're giving the customer what they want, but at the same time satisfying your operational needs.
Yeah, and our ability to actually
do
and
all the things. To actually to execute on them. Yeah.
With our small team.
With your small team.
And if you could create one fresh initiative or program for Citro that you haven't discovered that we have today, what would it be?
Well, I have mentioned this before, but I think you're already working on it, which was linking a Qantas or a Virgin or whatever it might be to the card that makes it valuable to spend money with the card. So you're using Qantas as a potential. I use Qantas. I'm a Qantas Health Fund user, so I get points from paying my Qantas monthly fee. I'm a Red Energy user, and I've signed up because I get Qantas points.
Yep.
And I'm a Uber One user, and I get Qantas points that way. So even though they're minuscule relative to what I would need for a frequent flyer, return to Melbourne, for example, they add up, and that's an incentive. So if you could link that incentive to an introductory offer, for argument's sake, or a limited time offer where, for example, you got your $50 for a $600 spend. Well, $600 probably cover two people going to Melbourne at the moment.
Yeah.
So it would be easier if you could say, special offer this month, $100 into your wallet if you buy 2 tickets to Melbourne, which are being discounted at the moment. So it's just a limited time offer. You're getting some extra benefit from it.
Yeah.
Qantas have got a new customer potentially, and
it's a real concrete thing.
Yeah.
That people know what I'm getting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. Okay. So almost there. Just one more question for you.
Sure.
What do you think an amazing retirement looks like?
I'm living my best life.
I've left the easy one to last.
Yeah, well, so there's an expression that you should wake up and be grateful for one thing every day. And I definitely feel grateful every day that I can enjoy my retirement the way I'm enjoying it, because I would not have been able to envisage this. some years ago. So this is
So you didn't sort of feel that way prior to retirement?
no. I didn't think it would be as enjoyable as it has been, and I'm worried that it's not going to last as long as it will.
What was your trepidation about then? Like, you know, if you kind of thought, oh, retirement, like
Boredom.
boredom.
That's something that I hear quite a lot.
Yeah.
You know, people say, so what do you do with your day?
Yeah.
And my dad, for example, who was very much into bridge, so he used to play four times a week, he was never bored, and he always occupied himself with something.
He's got to indulge that passion.
That's right.
All the time in the world.
So I don't have that passion but I'm allowed to explore other areas with what I've given myself. So if, for example, I can't be asked to do something today, then I don't have to.
Yeah.
And there's no pressure on me to say, no, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. And you know, you used to come home from a day at work and think, well, actually, what did I achieve today? I know I spent a lot of time doing things, but what did I actually achieve? Whereas on a day-to-day basis, where there are things that I can get, oh, okay, this is what I did, this is what I did next, this is what I did next. I didn't plan it that way. It's just the way it came out, and I like change. And I think you have to be someone who, if you're not a person who enjoys change, it's going to be a very difficult transition unless you've got your life mapped out for you perfectly the way you want it, because things don't always go the way you planned. For me, moving country was one massive change. Doing different types of jobs over my career has been a massive change. So I enjoy change. Not everybody does. And so waking up each day not knowing exactly how the day is going to fold out,
Doesn't bother you?
Doesn't bother me at all. Whereas previously, I knew exactly what my day was going to look like and what I had to do to execute.
Yeah, actually, that's true. The lack of structure could probably put some people undone. It's been the making of you.
Yeah.
I wonder, can you think of, like, if someone is nervous about that, because I know that is a big, like, part of retirement for some people, would there be any advice that you'd have to a person that's nervous about retirement for that reason?
Talk to other people who are retired. I think that's really important, and you know, you've got the perfect setup with Citro, with a community that's retired, and I think that having a retirement page, for argument's sake, ask questions to the community, I think that would be really helpful, because as a retiree, it can be very lonely if you're a person that hasn't got those type of relationships already in place.
Yeah.
So I think before you retire, make sure you talk to people about what they've done in their retirement, because it might be they spark something within you that you hadn't even thought of yourself.
Yeah.
But I think it's important you go into this with open eyes and a plan.
Yep. And, like, you know, actually, you know, this Meet Our Members and this CCO, that's how we're kind of pitching the article that we're writing. It's about members. So other members who aren't a CCO can come on, and we want to profile them. And you're right, we should kind of group them together as retirement stories.
Correct.
This is what retirement looks like to Charlie. This is what retirement looks like to Thomas. This, you know, because you're right, we don't see enough of those stories. The pre-retirees in our membership, I reckon, are the ones that are going to be reading those, but also the currently retired ones too. You know what I mean? Like learning about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of the effort is put into people of the moment. For example, when I used to put corporate events on, but I wanted to do something with retirees, so retired chairmen or retired CEOs or whatever. But we didn't think that we would have the audience for it when I was in my corporate role. But that experience that those people have is invaluable, and I don't think we do enough as a community, for want of a better expression, to utilise those people.
Agree.
And you know, with me doing my guiding, a lot of my contemporaries that are doing it with me, they are that type of generation and older. So you know, I'm not one of the youngest, but certainly at the lower end of the age spectrum on the doing guiding, and I get such valuable input from talking to those people.
Yeah.
Not just about the guiding aspect. I'm talking about just in life in general.
Yeah, just talking about life stories and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's something that our society doesn't do well. We don't have a lot of opportunities to cross-pollinate across generations.
Absolutely.
Outside of your own family.
Yeah.
And I think that's really lacking in terms of. I remember thinking it when I became a parent, and then when I was trying to raise teenagers, and then now I'm thinking it as I look down to what my retirement might look like. I'm so lucky to have the job I have because I do hear a lot of stories, but most people don't.
Yeah.
They don't kind of know that many people that are retired,
No.
And it doesn't
Or
kind of come
they
up.
think that they're just registered for the knackers yard.
Yeah,
Because-
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is so much experience in that. And I know that there are initiatives to bring people who are retired into the workforce for on a part-time basis.
Yeah.
But that doesn't get publicised at all well.
No, like for because I think there's a government scheme at one point that was similar to that, and I barely heard about it, and I write in the industry, but
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, and you've really touched on it a lot in our conversation. You're right. Number one is that get yourself financially sorted, but that's only one of the story of three.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like I think a lot of people put too much emphasis on that and don't actually think beyond that as to what does my life look like? How is it structured? What am I doing in any given day?
Yeah.
Do I have any hobbies outside of work that are going to carry me through and stuff?
Yeah.
But you're lucky in the sense of you're a curious person,
Yes.
open to new things. It's always going to work out for Charlie, right? Whereas a lot of other people aren't, and I
No,
do think that
I
they
never
panic.
understood that.
Yeah, no,
I-
me neither.
yeah.
Nah. Who are they?
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And I do think there's a panic, and I think that's where the reputation of unwinding in retirement comes from, because a lot of people do seem to just retire and stop, and then they get old and their health goes, and But there's a whole cohort of retirees who are changing that, and I think that you're leading the way there.
Well, thank you, but I also think that the ageism that exists in society is working against the betterment of society as far as I'm concerned. Because when I was young, 66 was ancient.
Yeah.
Now I'm 66, I think I'm young.
Of course you're young.
But you can't put an old head on young shoulders. So you've got to go through that life experience to be able to see, look back on where you were and see how you've come here. And some of those bad experiences that we've all encountered along the way were the right experiences to take you along the path that you've taken. And a lot of the learnings that I've discovered have come from my failures rather than from my successes.
Yeah.
So it's how you manage that process, and to be curious about that, I think, is a really important thing.
Yeah, to be curious and to understand, you can always change your mind. So you can sort of start wandering down here.
Yeah.
But that, hey, you learn new things, and so you have new opinions, and so you can backtrack. And then, I think people worry. I think still at an older age, worry about what other people think about the choices that they make.
Yes.
And I think some work needs to be done for some people to kind of get over that, if you like, so that they can really learn to hear their own voice, because I don't think we get to hear our own voice a lot until later. And then, if you've silenced it your whole life, how are you ever going to know what it sounds like,
100%. And I didn't realise that about myself either until I got to a certain position, and probably in my 50s was when I realised, I'm not the person I thought I was. I'm this person, and this person I really like.
Yeah. I'm more comfortable with him.
I'm more comfortable with him because this is the person that, for example, I'd been taught to move into because of my parents, wanted me to follow that particular path.
Yeah.
And then you end up going down that particular course, and then that takes you along different levels, and then all of a sudden you find yourself at a certain point in time where, with me, I found myself unemployed at one stage and thinking, oh shit, what do I do now? And that pushed me into explore aspects of my personality that I hadn't really recognized with myself, and the skill sets that I had, that I then started to say, well, what is it that I can do with what I've got? And the next job that I managed to get was exactly the right job that was for me.
Because you'd really given it like that drill down
Absolutely.
thought.
And I hadn't said, well, this is what I've done in the past, therefore I must do the same now. It was
the Charles pathway, right?
Correct.
Like, yeah.
And so once I was able to do that, it opened up a whole new world. So not being too cognizant of other people's opinion of you, because they're going to think what they're going to think irrespective, and to be as genuine and honest with yourself as you can.
Yeah.
And that might not be a pretty picture at certain points in your life, but face up to it. And if that's not giving you the outcomes you're looking for, well, then you need to find out why and what you need to do to improve on that.
Yeah,
And
I think that's really thoughtful. And I think, and I'm going to be very generalizing here,
yeah,
but I think as a baby boomer male, your wisdom in that capacity is actually quite unusual. I don't think a lot of men of a certain age actually ever have that introspection, ever question what society's asked of them, ever think, was that the right thing for me? That professional sheen we talked about is kind of everything. Do you know what I mean? And they kind of just tick the boxes, ambition, ambition, ambition. And then I think that's why retirement hits extremely hard.
Yeah, I agree.
Because that they've never learned how to be introspective. And, you know, that's not their fault in regards to what society expects of them. But I'm hoping that may be a slightly different thing for our children's generations.
Oh, definitely.
As we're raising different young men. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I look at our kids, for example, and we've never, Helen and I have never pushed them down a particular path. We've just let them explore their own personality and what works for them. And they're
but
all...
you yourself felt pushed, you said.
Oh,
like
100%.
Set.
Yeah, definitely I was. I particularly wanted to be a psychologist.
So they wanted you to be a businessman?
That's right.
Yeah.
And specifically...
You would have been an amazing psychologist. Are you hearing this?
But I never, it never even was a possibility that I could do that because of the strictness of my parents being that generation.
Yeah.
Having kids and bringing kids up in a different way to the way my parents brought us up caused conflict with me and my parents because they wanted us to bring us...
That's little talked about as well, actually.
Oh, absolutely, because they had the Victorian mentality that children to be heard and not seen and not heard, and my voice as a child wasn't allowed to be explored because I had to do what my parents told me to do.
And weirdly, even no matter how old we get, that parental approval is still so important, isn't it?
Yep.
That conflict would have sat really hard. It's hard to make that sort of change with your own kids if your parents are so anti about it.
And especially if your father, which mine was successful.
Yeah.
Because as a male growing up under the shadow of a successful businessman, that's a difficult burden to bear.
Yeah.
And it was only once I realised that I had a skill set that was different to my dad's, that I didn't need to be like my dad, and my dad took a long time to accept that fact.
Yeah, okay.
And he also took a long time to accept the fact that the way we brought our kids up was different to the way he brought his children up.
Yep.
And then, as in his later years, he finally realised, actually, this works.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd done something similar. So the funny story.
That's amazing.
It's a funny story. When my mum unfortunately died, we were going through all the stuff that she'd accumulated in years, and we found a book that I gave my parents when my dad retired, which was Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
I remember that book.
And I wrote inside, and I remember after I came across it because I put a little inscription in there saying, "I think this might help you when Dad retires," to both of them. And my dad never read it, my mum never read it, and then when we were going through the clean outs, he said, "Oh, what's this?" I said, "Oh, this is a book I bought you ages ago, but I don't think you read it." He says, "No." Anyway, went off to read it, and a few days later he came back, "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" He said it would have made life so much easier.
Oh, that's amazing. Actually, just before we came up for this interview, I'm in the middle of editing an article about empty nesters and coming back together as a couple, and how terrifying it can be for some couples, which you and Helen don't seem to have had that problem.
No.
But it sounds like your mother and father may have.
Oh, definitely.
Because suddenly, I think in those days, and it's still true today, he's sort of suddenly coming into her domain, and everything's changed for him. But in actual fact, like, life is fairly much the same for her, right? And so he's kind of intruding, if you like, and it can cause a lot of disruptions in you know, in the marriage and stuff at that point.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I've got a friend of mine who's now 70, turning 70. He's retired and is desperate to do something, but get back in the workforce. And I'm saying to him, why don't you just focus on giving?
Yeah.
And do some volunteer work.
Yeah.
And his wife is in my saying, get him out of the bloody house.
Yeah.
Because he's
But
driving
volunteer
me mad.
work is the way forward in that regard, isn't
I
it?
agree.
Like, they're desperate for people, and they're particularly desperate for people with life experience. I was actually talking to the Lifeline team just last week about how much they want the older, like they tend to have students come through who are studying psychology and stuff, and they have to volunteer as part of their course and stuff. But of course they'll do all of the training with Lifeline, they'll do their hours for the 3 months, whatever it is, and then they never come back again.
Right.
Because they're not really suited to it, what
No.
Lifeline require. You know,
Well, they
they're
wouldn't have
young,
life
it's
experience,
quite
yeah.
terrifying, I'm sure,
I'm sure.
be on the end of the phone, like for that kind of thing. And they were just talking about how, you know, what can we do to encourage older people to volunteer. And that's an interesting angle, actually, get him out of the house angle.
Yeah, exactly.
Could
Definitely.
be a good one.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I've got another friend who every morning goes walking with his wife, and they spend quite a lot of time together, and it works. It's horses for courses.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think you know, to coming back to the original, one of the questions you asked was, if you're planning for retirement, really spend some time understanding what is it your spouse
Yeah, what they're wanting as well. You've
That's
mentioned
right.
that as one of your key points.
It
Like,
really
are
is
you on the
important.
same page?
Yeah.
Do you have the same vision?
Yeah.
Grey divorce is on the rise, and it really doesn't
Absolutely.
surprise me.
Yeah.
The kids fly the coop. Suddenly you're looking at each other and you think, we actually haven't had a proper conversation that's not about the kids for 20
Correct.
years.
Exactly.
And like, I'm not sure I like you anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
is there anything else that you wanted to mention before we wrap up?
No, this has been fascinating and really enjoyable experience. So thank
Yeah.
you for inviting me again.
Yeah.
Hopefully, what we've discussed will be of value to people. So
I very
Yeah.
much think it is, yeah. I can't thank you enough. Your
No, you're
insights
welcome.
have been fantastic for us on the content team
Excellent.
and for Citro in general.
lovely.
Thank
Thank
you, Charlie.
No
Cheers.
worries. Cheers.
And stop.